Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the M365 Voice. We're thrilled to be here today. My name is Sarah Hazy, and with me I have Antonio.
I'm Antonio Mayo.
And I am Mike Madarani.
Perfect. Are we ready?
We're ready.
Always ready.
So Microsoft 365 question at large. If you'd like to submit a question for one of our episodes, just go to m365voice.com and you can go there to submit a question. We set?
Yep.
All right, questions on. My users are confused about when to share files through SharePoint, Teams, or OneDrive. How can we help them?
Oh, wow. That is a good
help our
question.
users know when to use SharePoint, OneDrive, or Teams for sharing files?
I find the OneDrive side of this easier than Teams and SharePoint, to be honest. When I look at OneDrive, and what I tend to recommend is OneDrive is your personal collaboration space. It's where you work on documents for yourself or for your work, drafts, early versions of documents, things that are not yet ready to share with a wide group of people, but you might do some light sharing from there as you author an initial document. Then once it's ready to share with a larger group or a team, then either bring it to Teams or SharePoint. The distinction between those two is harder, though, for me. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree that basically, if you wanna collaborate on a file with a larger group, you always use SharePoint or Teams to do that. When you wanna share a file with a specific person, or you wanna keep it to yourself for now, then OneDrive is the natural place for it, because this is your personal space, and then you want to have to just work on it before you share it with someone. Or I would say less than 5 is when you want to keep it in OneDrive. When it goes a little bit more, then basically now you're stepping over to the collaboration space, the much larger collaboration space, I call it, with Teams or SharePoint.
I think it's an excellent motto. I think it's tough for users to kind of think about or remember to view it that way. I know I've worked with a lot of users who have folders in their OneDrive, and they would name it the Antonio Sarah folder. And anytime I want to share something with Antonio, if I've shared that folder with him, I put it in that folder and then Antonio can see it. I know a lot of users that kind of do that and set it up. And the challenge with that, of course, is it's really putting collaboration needs into OneDrive, where you should really enable things like conversation and the ability to track and easily be able to get to those documents. And that's some of what SharePoint and Teams offers. So I think your advice is better advice if you're going to work on it yourself or with up to maybe 3 or 4 or 5 other people. OneDrive is an okay place, but then eventually if you want to share it with a broader audience, SharePoint or Teams should be a destination where you think about moving that file to eventually.
Yeah. I would say also places where perhaps version history or metadata on files, Teams and SharePoint is better as well than OneDrive. Right, as you know, in OneDrive, we can't have custom metadata columns. Version history you can have, doesn't feel like as formal a place for version history as Teams and SharePoint, though.
Yeah, and technically you're not sharing a file from Teams. You are sharing a file from either SharePoint or OneDrive, right? You're using Teams to kind of collaborate on that file, which makes this is the great experience where you have dropped the file, whatever you drop it in a private chat or in a post, in a conversation, it goes to OneDrive or it goes to SharePoint, and then you can collaborate on that file in Teams. So technically, yes, you are using the Teams platform to share, but it is at the end of the day, the backend is SharePoint or OneDrive.
Mike, I was going to bring up, because that throws so many of the users that I support every day, that throws them a curveball, because they think that Teams is the place because they go to the Teams in their browser or in their desktop app or the mobile app, and they feel like it is the place, and that any files that you attach into Teams live in Teams. And the reality is Teams is the context that allows you to collaborate, but that the file, based on how you share it in Teams, is stored either in a SharePoint site behind Teams or it goes to your OneDrive. And can we take for just a moment to really explain that for a second for those people who don't understand when it goes to OneDrive versus when it goes to SharePoint? And you said it really quickly, but there might be people who didn't catch that.
Sure, absolutely. So if you are part of a team, so every time you create a team, it's going to create by default one channel called general channel. And then you can go and create multiple channels or whatever the team purpose is. Once you create that team, it is going to create that SharePoint site behind the scene for you. And that general channel will create a general folder in the SharePoint document library. So if I am having a conversation, or now we call it post in team, where everyone in that team can see my conversation, or if I go and drop this file into that conversation, into that channel, it automatically takes that file and uploads it into the SharePoint site under the specific folder. So if I am in a general channel, is going to drop it is going to upload it to the general folder. If I am in an XYZ channel, is going to take it to the XYZ folder in SharePoint site. If I have a private chat, whether it is one-to-one or a group chat, if I'm chatting with both of you, Sarah and Antonio, and I want to share that document with you, if I take that document, let's say from my desktop, and I drop it into that chat, it is going to take that file, because it is a private chat. It is not part of a team, so there is no channel. It's going to take that file and upload it to my own personal OneDrive. And it will automatically share that file with both of you, and it will automatically give you editing permissions to allow you to collaborate on that file with myself.
So Mike, everything you've said is correct, but from the end user's perspective, I don't think they care.
Correct. Exactly.
I think don't take this wrong way, but I think we complicate the answer for the end user when we explain it that way. And I think part of the answer to this question needs to be, which solution do we want to direct users to for a particular purpose? So I do find it's easier to answer this when you've decided for your organization, what am I going to use Teams for? What am I going to use OneDrive for? What am I going to use SharePoint for? Right? If my answer, like I think we've answered the OneDrive side. Right. OneDrive tends to be a little bit easier of an answer when you think of it in the context of, this is my personal workspace, and this is where I might do some light sharing with a small number of people, as you said. But Teams versus SharePoint, like for organizations where they've decided all collaboration between groups of people are going to happen in Teams. Teams is our go-forward solution for collaboration. Mm-hmm. Then the place to share documents with, groups of people or teams of people is Teams.
I agree.
And we're going to use SharePoint for, let's say, intranet pages, our place where our corporate communications team or HR team is going to author and curate content, and they're going to publish it to a very large group of people, and the large, mass of people are going to access it in read-only fashion. Then they would share that content, or more so manage the permissions to that content for the larger organization. But I think when you break up the what do we used to call this, kind of how you position the solutions, the positioning for the solutions in your organization, and you make it really easier for people to decide, where do I go to do certain types of collaboration? Then the answer to that question of where do I share from becomes easier.
And I think it's a great question, because the question that you just answered is from an organizational perspective, where to share, right? And it should be simple. I take a very pragmatic view to governance, even way back in the old SharePoint on-prem, SharePoint 2010, SharePoint 2013 days. I took a very pragmatic view of governance. So it should, Susan Hanley always calls it no rough edges, right? The goal of governance is no rough edges. But this idea of where to share that you gave is simple. You could describe it very quickly in a half a page, in a short news article, or with pictures, or a short video clip, right? So if I'm creating things just for me, or to share with a small group of 3 or 4 people, OneDrive is my place, right? But if I want to share with then at this organization, we're going to choose to do that entirely within Microsoft Teams, and then SharePoint is for news. That's pretty clear, and you could describe that with a few pictures, a quick video clip, and it makes it clear. If more companies took the time to build out a clear, simple model for understanding that, I think it would make this a lot easier.
Yeah.
Love it.
Now let's bring in one more factor, more wrench to this. When you need to share with people outside your organization, where does that happen?
Yeah. But it depends. There's a lot of scenarios here. It's very similar. I don't see it a lot different. If I am sharing a file with a specific user, which is outside of the organization, I definitely don't want to share a file from a SharePoint site. I can go into my OneDrive, and if I have that document in the OneDrive, I can definitely share it with that one person. If I want to start sharing multiple files or with multiple users, I can go and share a site or add guests to that SharePoint site. What are your thoughts on that?
I think based on my experience, if companies allow external sharing, I oftentimes see that they don't allow external sharing across SharePoint, Teams, and OneDrive. Like they like to be a little bit, and I'm interested, Antonio, in what you see, but in my experience, they open up one path. Like they may say OneDrive is how we share externally, or Teams, there's a way to be able to add in guests or share externally. They're less likely to want to share SharePoint sites externally, but I oftentimes see that they don't allow it across the board.
Yeah, I agree. So from a security perspective, I see a lot of organizations choose one path for external collaboration, and many of them are still figuring it out. Like, what is the best way to do this so that we avoid, so that we reduce risk, right? I've seen various posts and messages out there about, well, if you're going to turn off external sharing, you might as well turn off email. And I think that's the wrong approach. This is about, when you think about external sharing, it's really about reducing risk. It's not about shutting down every channel. So I like what you said about, Sarah, about choosing one path for that, because it makes it easy for people to understand. Most of the organizations I've seen have not enabled external sharing from OneDrive. And if they have enabled external sharing, it's typically from SharePoint sites. They're still figuring out the controls around Teams and guests, because I think guests in Teams, which is different from external sharing, complicates the discussion, right? It's not easy to determine the difference between a guest and an external user for a lot of people. What can they do? What can't they do? So I have found that primarily if you're going to share externally, many organizations are doing it from SharePoint. And usually it's off by default, and you have to request it to be enabled, and you have to have a business justification for enabling that external sharing and who you're external sharing to. As well, every single organization I've seen has turned off anonymous guest links for various reasons, right? The whole notion of it being anonymous. Yes, you can have one-time passwords, which are nice, and it kind of, it provides some level of additional mitigation of risk, but everyone wants you to authenticate in order to access stuff that's been shared externally.
Exactly.
Where I think they get worried from a risk perspective is if I externally share a library or a SharePoint site with someone externally, how do I limit that from a time perspective, right? Like, how do I time bomb that so that after 3 months that has to be renewed? Because that's not a feature yet. You can do that for external guest, like anonymous links, but not for external sharing through authentication. So yeah, one path, long-winded answer, but one path for external sharing. And typically I've seen it be a SharePoint site so far, because people are still trying to figure out external sharing and guests and Teams.
Yeah, you're right. This is a typical one from going. Traditionally, if they were on-prem and they had created an extranet, and they're used to having this extranet separations of a site collection for clients, vendors, whatever that is, projects, and they go to SharePoint, waiting SharePoint Online, and they do share that SharePoint site with external vendors. But to your point, yes, there's no time bomb on it. So once you share a site in SharePoint, you have to manually go and disable that.
Tough stuff to be able to explain, but I feel like we've talked this through pretty well at how do we solve this where to share questions for different organizations. And if anything else, I think that the one thing, and Antonio, I'm going to take this from what you suggested, being able to simply and easily answer the question of where to share for your employees and making that accessible somewhere where they can see it, read it, learn it, and watch it will help them to be able to move forward and know where to share.
Exactly.
Great question.
All right. Well, thank you both for your help on that one. Another great episode, and we will see you all next time. Thank you for joining us.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.